Welcome to this Friday at Fran's Holiday Quick Gift Ideas. Today we're going to be making a double wine bag carrier like you see here, and you can either put wine in it or you can, if you're not a wine drinker, you can put soft drinks in it. You could also put 2 bottles of wine or maybe a baguette and some cheese on this side, and it's got a little pocket here that you can either put your opener in, your wine bottle opener, or a knife if you've got a baguette and cheese. So a little handy thing there. It's a great gift idea or for yourself. So you're going to need your outside fabric, which is 12.5 by 23.5, and your lining fabric, which is the same size, 12.5 by 23.5. And I have backed my outside fabric with a fusible fleece, and I have backed my lining fabric with a lightweight interfacing so to make them both a little steady. So this actually stands up nicely by itself. So the first thing I'm going to do is put my little pocket on here. So I have done some pressing ahead of time. On the top here I have pressed it over 1/4 inch twice, and I'm just going to stitch down the top of this pocket. So once I've sewn down that top, I've got my other edges pressed in 1/4 inch, and I've marked my top about 1.5 inches in from the side, about 3 inches in from the top, and I'm just going to pin this on here. Okay, when I'm pinning in line with my sewing, I always like to think, what direction am I going to sew this down? And whenever I sew down a pocket or an applique, I like to work with that on my left side. So I'm putting my pins in so that as I'm sewing in that direction, I can pull my pins out. So typically if I'm putting 2 seams together, I like them perpendicular to the edge, but something like a pocket, I like them holding it down right at that edge there. So now I'm going to just sew this down just about 1/8 inch from the edge. You might want to do a little reverse at that beginning to always strengthen the top of your pockets, because they tend to get pulled on. And if you're doing this, you want to set your machine, if you can, so the needle stops down. That's going to make it easier to go around your corners. There at the end. Okay, now what I got my clips out for. So the way this bag is cut, we are going to bring the 2 short ends together, and I'm gonna, so when you're working with something thick like this is with the batting, clips are a nice way to hold it together, because sometimes it's kind of hard to get those pins all the way through all these layers. So we're going to just pin this and sew it, and then I'm going to do the same thing with my lining. I'm going to sew this with 1/4 inch seam allowance, so I am going to adjust my seam here so I can use the foot that I have on to get that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, then I'm going to repeat that with my lining. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is square off my corners, and I'm going to push this down at this fold here just so I can see where the fold is. But I'm going to start by bringing together my seam with my bottom, and I like to match those two up, and putting a pin through that helps me see that I'm matched up. Okay, for this bottom, I'm going to measure 1.5 inches up from this point, and I like to double check that I'm straight by seeing that then whatever this measurement is, this measurement is going to be double that, or I like to make sure I have 1.5 inches on each side of that. I think I have a dried up pen here. You get one. Thank you. And I'm going to do the same thing. So on the side that has the fold, I'm just going to make sure that my seam, which I make sure is opened all the way, is matching with where I did that little hand press of a fold on the other side. So I'm going to do that. I'm doing this to the lining, and I'm going to do the same thing to the outside of the bag. After I get all my corners marked, I've got the 4 corners marked, I'm going to sew that down, being sure that I back stitch both at the beginning and end, because this is going to get some wear and tear on it. Okay, so I've got all 4 of my corners sewn. Now I'm going to trim these down to about 1/4 inch. So there are a number of ways that you can put lining in a bag. For this particular one, we have them both sewn all the way around. So I'm going to turn the outer bag right side out. Poke out my corners. And I've already pressed over the tops of my bags about 3/8 of an inch. And I'm going to put the lining inside. I'm going to put my 2 seams on opposite sides of the bag. So now what I'm going to do is just clip this all the way around the top. Just having the two bags even. Now, one thing I did not talk about at the beginning is the straps for this. So on my first bag that I showed you that was completed, I used a belting or a strap material So that was already made for me. For this particular bag, I decided, since I couldn't find that to match, I decided to make some straps. And they landed on the floor. Okay, there you go, made some straps. And for those, I cut those 4 inches wide, and either one you want your straps to be about 24 inches long. So, so with the 4 inches wide, I cut a batting that was 3 inches wide, centered that, ironed that in there, and then I turned the edges in 1/4 inch, so it ended up being about 1.5 inches wide, and then sewed down both sides. You have to sew the one side to hold your opening closed, and sewing the other side just makes it look more complete. So once I've got my lining placed in there, I'm going to measure about 2 inches from my side seam and take my clip out, and I'm going to put my strap in there. So it's about 1/2 inch inside there. And we're going to re-clip this. And take the other end of my strap, put it down here. 2 inches in. Just double check that you don't have your strap twisted when you do this. On this side, I can just make sure it matches the other side. Okay, so that's all secured. I am going to get myself a free arm on my machine so that I can put this in here. Now, the original directions I got, and this actually was a bag made by Art Gallery Fabrics on one of their YouTubes. She said to sew this 1/4 inch from the top. I'm starting with just like 1/8 inch from the top because I want to make sure I catch all that turned in edge. And then I'm actually going to sew it twice. I'm going to sew it again another 1/8 inch away because I really want to secure these straps in here. This does get fairly thick. This machine I'm working on today, the Epic 95Q, has a built-in even feed, but you might find in your machines that you benefit from using an even feed foot, especially when you get all this thickness you're sewing together here at the top. Reach the part where I started. I'm just going to pick up my foot, move over a little bit, and do a second quick sew around. So because I tucked those straps in that 1/2 inch, I'm catching them twice for that little extra strength. Okay, there's one more step on this, and that's to make the double backing. So this is about 11 inches across. Yes, so I want to find halfway, which is going to be 5.5 inches. So I'm going to measure from the side and mark it at 5.5 inches. And this is the one that wasn't working. Now this pen that I'm using is a heat away pen, so I'm just going to take this later over to my ironing board and give it a little bit of heat, and these marks will be gone. So I marked that about 5.5 inches in and 6 inches down, and I'm just going to sew that. Now you want to reinforce this stitch, so I believe almost every sewing machine on the market today has what's called a triple stitch or a reinforced stitch. If you look at your I couldn't find it on this machine. If you look at your pictures of what your stitches look like, it's going to look like it's got 3 little stitches right next to each other, because that's about the only way they can show that. But what it does is it's going to go forward and then back, so you are laying down like a triple layer of stitches. So that's just going to make this nice and strong. The other thing you could do is sew all the way down and then sew back up again to make it stronger. And since it's a triple stitch, I don't really need to go backwards on it, but I'm going to do a little fixed stitch that I have in here. Okay, and there is your double wine bag, and ready to give as a gift with or without the wine. Thanks for joining us today, and look for other quick holiday gift ideas.